Are there any more survivors? You're walking on dangerous ground. Go somewhere safe.
What about you? It's dangerous for you too, right?
Yes, but I promised I'd wait here.
Right here?
This is the closest place. If I knew this was going to happen, I would have made it much earlier. It might be too late. Sorry to dump all this on you. It's really not your concern. Besides, I don't even know who you are. Huh? That mark on your hand! You have the crest! Get away! Ah! The cursed mark!
Evergrace is a combination action RPG and dress-up game, developed by FromSoft's and published by HTech in the US and Ubisoft in Europe. It was released in 2000 as a launch title for the PlayStation 2. Now, hearing the terms From Software and action RPG so close together kinda makes the Dark Souls comparisons inevitable. So let's get them out of our system, shall we? Apart from both being third-person action RPGs, both games have you explore a dying, forgotten realm while fighting monsters with slow, methodical, real-time combat, while trying to piece together a quite cryptic story. That's about where the similarities end though, as Evergrace has a vastly different, much more colorful vibe than FromSoft's flagship dark fantasy series, as well as some very unique gameplay elements.
What are you doing here? It's dangerous. Do you wish to die? That might not be such a bad idea.
When talking about FromSoft's older titles, the discussion mostly centers around the old Armored Core games, the Kingsfield series, and maybe the Kingsfield derivative Shadow Tower. And while I'm far from the only one who's talked about Evergrace, it does seem to be a game that is often neglected when considering FromSoft's catalog. My goal with this video is to help shine a light on this incredibly unique and strange game that helped pave the way to FromSoft's more popular titles. I will be doing so in a somewhat structured format, talking about the different aspects of Evergrace, from its presentation to its gameplay, and finally its story. But before we get to that, I thought that the best way to convey to you what makes this game so oddly compelling is to just take you through the opening minutes of it. Because right from the start, Evergrace hits you in the face with how weird and wonderful of an experience it's going to be. So let's roll the opening cinematic. After this beautiful little opening, we get greeted by the main menu screen. We start a new game, and are prompted to select one of two protagonists. Evergrace handles its branching narrative in a pretty unique way. It doesn't really matter who we start with, since we can freely switch between both characters at any save point. So if we get stuck on one of the game's many esoteric puzzles, we can simply switch to the other character and get stuck with them instead. After we finish one of the two stories, we are then prompted to continue with the other character and finish their story as well, which will then lead into the finale. So the game does expect us to play through both character stories and doesn't really end until we do. It's a pretty unique approach to a branching story like that, and gives the player a lot of control over how they want to experience the game. Anyway, we start with Charlene, who then proceeds to dump some lore on us in her best TikTok text-to-speech impression.
Rubain. In the blink of an eye, the world was conquered by the strongest military empire with magical Palmyra armaments. Lost Empire. The empire flourished, but suddenly it vanished without a trace. All that remained was a legend and the Biliana forest. Everything was cast into darkness. I was telling this fairy tale to that young boy. But a terrible thing occurred. I wanted to help him, the boy who gazed sadly at his own hands. So I...
Probably the first thing that will jump out to anyone trying out this game is its eclectic, experimental soundtrack by composer Kota Hoshino. I understand that a lot of people will probably find the music in this game abrasive or obnoxious, but I personally absolutely love it. It reminds me of early Animal Collective in a really good way, and I think it's a great fit for the game, creating a sort of hypnotic pull that really worms its way into your brain as you play. One of my favorite tracks is On the Sunlit Hill, the background music for the Royal Commons, the game's starting area. Together with the golden-hued autumn visuals, it makes this zone unforgettable. Whenever I think of Evergrace, I think of this area, with this music playing. Another fave is Piercing the Heavens, a track that plays in one of the game's late-game dungeons, which gives that particular place a very mystical, ethereal vibe. Of course, I also need to mention the shop theme, Shopping with Palmyra Ore, which starts off sounding like an anxiety attack, only to develop into this jaunty and chipper tune. I hope you like this track, cause you're gonna be hearing it a lot. There is a note by Kota Hoshino in the game's official soundtrack, stating among other things, "If people who listen to Evergrace's soundtrack are able to feel the world of Evergrace, I would be very happy." And I think, if anything, he absolutely succeeded in that. His compositions are intrinsically linked to the game for me, and are one of the major aspects that make it stand out among titles with a more safe and generic score.
Too bad. I need to see him too, but look at me. This place is full of abandoned test subjects. You can't get to him.
How do I know unless I try? I think I have a better shot at it than you. You look bad.
When it comes to the visuals, they're definitely a little simple, with some areas that are kinda barren, and character models can be a little stiff too. But keep in mind that this was a PS2 launch title, so of course it's not gonna be as detailed as later games on the console's library. If anything, I think the game makes pretty good use of its visuals, with some quite varied environments, even if some areas definitely fare better than others. I already mentioned the Royal Commons, and it's definitely the prettiest zone in the game. The green sky, the vast sea, the golden autumn colors, as well as some weird structures, like these giant seashells, make for a very dreamlike atmosphere. It's just a very well constructed starting zone that does a good job at building intrigue. Imagine yourself strolling around the Royal Commons for the first time, stumbling across this cliff with a sign pointing at the top of a crooked spire emerging from the waters. The sign reads, Human Research Lab. If this doesn't make you want to know more about what the hell is going on in this game, I can't help you. I guess I should also talk about the voice acting, which I would describe as charmingly amateurish, like so many other aspects of this game. I think some of the voice actors actually do a pretty decent job. Darius's VA brings across the character's bitter and sarcastic demeanor pretty well, and Morpheus's VA injects his role with so much over-the-top camp that it's just a joy whenever he's on screen. The weakest link is definitely Charlene's voice actress, who sounds like they simply picked someone from The Office with absolutely no prior experience in voice work. But yeah, overall the voice acting just adds to Evergrace's strangeness and charm. So, as you're strolling around the Royal Commons with Charlene, you'll hopefully be able to find this white bow that blends in a little too well with the white bedsheet it's lying on. And you probably picked up the funny red pot outside as well. Now you're ready to engage with Evergrace's primary method of character progression, Palmyra Armaments.
That sword is called Palmyra Armaments. It's not a regular sword. It's different.
I know, it's magical. Right out of a fairy tale. It'll make me 100 times stronger.
Wise guy. Think you know everything, huh? I bet you don't know this.
Palmyra Armaments is essentially just the game's fancy term for equipment. Evergrace does not have an XP and leveling system. All of your stats are reliant on the equipment your character is wearing, and they're thus subject to change as you switch gear. Most armaments have certain special abilities tied to them that the game calls Palmyra actions. For example, a pair of boots might have the float ability, allowing you to float above damaging terrain when activated. A chest piece might have the Ice Raid ability, allowing you to lob a ball of frost at an enemy. A weapon might have the Chain Combo ability, allowing you to chain together a multi-hit combo, and so on and so forth. Using these abilities drains the armament's Palmyra power, which also doubles as its durability. Durability of armor-type equipment drains by simply walking around as well, although I think weapon durability only drains when the weapon is swung. You will have to do maintenance on your equipment fairly often, because when equipment breaks, it becomes very expensive to repair. Equipment can also be upgraded up to 2 times, increasing its stats and unlocking new powers. Now, while some equipment is dropped by enemies or found in chests, most of the time you'll be buying it in the shop from this friendly guy. The shop can be accessed at any save point in the game. Here you can trade Palmyra pieces, the game's currency, that you get from defeating enemies, for items and armaments. This is also where you repair and upgrade your equipment. You can even change the color of your gear, a feature that I desperately wish had carried over into the Souls games. Coloring your equipment isn't purely cosmetic either. The game has a built-in fashion system. Talk to the shopkeeper and he will evaluate your style based on the composition of your armor pieces and your color coordination. If he considers you stylish, you actually get a discount. A really cool feature is that every piece of equipment is visible on your character. This might not seem that impressive today, but at the time it was actually a major selling point of the game. They were so proud of their equipment system that they felt the need to integrate it into most of the game's puzzles, but we'll get to those.
Just going to stand there? You won't last long with that attitude. Come on, let's do battle.
Let us first talk about the combat. The way encounters work in Evergrace is a little strange. While there are some fixed enemy placements, most enemies just sort of spawn in out of thin air, which can be a bit jarring at first, but I got used to it pretty quickly. Combat itself is a simple affair. You got a power bar that fills up, and if you press the attack button when it's full, you do full damage with your attack. If If you press attack when it's half full, you do 50% damage, and so on. Now, one thing that's pretty neat is that the time it takes for your bar to fill up is limited by your current hit points. So if your health is at 50%, the power bar fills up twice as fast. The lower your health, the faster you can attack at full strength, encouraging a high-risk, high-reward playstyle. Other than that, the rhythm of combat does feel similar to FromSoft's Kingsfield series, in that you wait for your bar to fill, bait the enemy's attack, and try to position yourself in a way that you can hit the enemy safely. It works a lot better here though, because judging your position and your attack's range is so much easier in third person. And Evergrace actually has pretty satisfying hit feedback, unlike Kingsfield. One complication that Evergrace's combat system adds is the fact that enemies will often guard attacks from the front, so you have to either hit them while they're readying an attack, or get them from behind, which is easier said than done. The game also has the occasional boss fight, which are usually not great, but combat against regular foes is actually pretty fun once you got into the swing of things. One element that's important to consider while fighting is, well, elements. Enemies have different elemental weaknesses and resistances, so if you hit an enemy with the wrong weapon, or the wrong ability, they might actually get healed by your attack instead of damaged. It's actually possible to encounter a foe that you cannot harm with your current weaponry, so you have to save up for a weapon that can. The main gameplay loop of fighting enemies, getting Palmyra pieces, purchasing new equipment, repairing equipment, and upgrading equipment so you can fight enemies more efficiently is actually quite compelling, and was the main gameplay related reason this game got its hooks in me, despite the jank.
You've given me peace in the end. You're a kind, thoughtful young woman.
Alright, let's talk about the jank. I feel like I'm in a weird position when it comes to this topic, because I think I have a higher than average tolerance for janky mechanics and clunky controls. Like, I often hear people say the line, "Oh, the story's really great, but the gameplay sucks," about a game. And then I play it and it's fine? Like, I can see where people are coming from, but it's usually not so bad that it tempers my enjoyment of the game in any way. Like, I've heard people call games like Rule of Rose unplayable because of the combat, and yeah, the combat's not amazing, but it's really not that big of a deal usually, at least for me. So take my word with a grain of salt when I say that Evergrace plays absolutely fine. Sure, sometimes the camera isn't great, and sometimes you whiff attacks because you weren't positioned quite right, but overall, movement and combat feel just fine. I can imagine that younger players might have an issue with the camera controls at first, because this is a 3D game that came out before right analog stick camera controls were normalized, but I really don't think the camera controls are too bad. If you're just moving around, the camera usually does a pretty good job of following your character, and if you ever want to point the camera to where your character is facing, you just need to hit the right shoulder button. Easy peasy. Most of the jank comes more from questionable design decisions anyway, that give the game a sort of amateurish feel. Like some odd enemy or item placement, or multiple parts where you have no choice but to wade through poison. And this was before Miyazaki joined the company, mind you. There's also some trademark FromSoft bullshit moments that will likely cost you your life. Like getting hit by an attack on a narrow land bridge and getting immediately flung into lava. Or this one. Despite moments like these, I wouldn't call Evergrace hard by any means. It is much easier to get through than any of the Kingsfield games, Shadow Tower, or any Souls game for that matter. Fights are usually pretty easy, apart from some annoying bosses, and enemies drop money very generously, so you never have to farm long for that new piece of gear you got your eyes on. I think anyone who puts their mind to it will be able to finish this game. However, there is one major roadblock in the form of the game's puzzles. Some of these puzzles are pretty esoteric, others are simply annoying. Most of the puzzles in this game require you to either wear certain equipment or use certain elemental abilities, or have your equipment be the right color even. If you don't have the right gear for the puzzle, it's back to the grind until you can afford it. That's why it's usually a good idea to get a wide variety of equipment as soon as it's available, and never sell your old gear if you can help it. Again, getting the money for it is not that hard usually, and you can even give the shopkeeper a funky little mushroom for a chunky discount. I still had to consult a walkthrough on some of these puzzles though. The worst offender for me was the mirror puzzle in the underground shrine. A horrible place where everything looks the same, and I never wanna go there again. Even the guide was confused about this one. Once in the holy shrine room, try turning the green mirror to open the purple chamber door. This seems to work almost every time. Yeah, it ended up being a lot of trial and error. What's much harder than the puzzles though, is piecing together the game's cryptic story.
I've told you already, I don't know anything. I can only interpret and tell you what I hear.
This is too strange. Are you for real? Wait, don't answer that.
Before we get into the story of Evergrace, I need to shout out some of my sources, without which this video would not have been possible. At first, a big thank you to user Alayna, aka TapTroop, who uploaded the game's official strategy guide. This guide not only came in clutch for some of the more obtuse puzzles, but it actually has a pretty comprehensive lore section as well. Alayna seems to be the Evergrace superfan, and it's hard not to stumble upon her while looking up info on the game. I'm gonna put a link to her website in the video's description. There you will not only find the scans for the guide, but a lot of other great Evergrace content as well. Like a fan translation she's done of both the official Evergrace novelization and the light novel. Seriously, definitely check out her page if you wanna fall even deeper into the Evergrace rabbit hole. Without her contributions to this game, this video would be a lot worse off. Another shout out goes to the Internet Archive for housing scans of the Evergrace manual, which actually contains a lot of background information on the setting, the characters, and some other things. It's spoiler free and pretty much required reading if you want to understand even a modicum of what's going on. You should definitely give it a read before playing the game yourself. Finally, I have to mention the Evergrace fandom wiki, who have kindly provided the Evergrace story codex, without which I would have had to do a lot of speculation. This codex can actually be unlocked in-game if you collect every type of item, which I didn't, but thanks to the wiki, I didn't have to. Now, I'm not gonna do a full recap of Evergrace's story. I want my videos to serve as reviews or recommendations first and foremost, and a full story summary with spoilers kind of goes against that philosophy. This section will merely go into what Evergrace is about and what makes its story interesting. I will touch upon some story background elements, but I won't spoil any major reveals or anything like that. Before we get any deeper, it must be repeated that Evergrace's storytelling is quite cryptic, due to a combination of FromSoft's typically esoteric writing and a not so great localization. A casual playthrough of the game will probably not suffice if you want to understand what's going on. So here's a short guide on how to approach Evergrace's story yourself. Step 1. Read the manual. It contains background information on characters, concepts, and the general setting. Step 2. Play the game. If you want to experience the story in chronological order, play Charlene's story first, then play Darius' story. Step 3. Check out the Prima strategy guide. It has an extensive lore section that goes into more detail on some of the more obscure background story elements. Step 4. If you can stomach it, play the game again. That's what I did. If not, check out the story codex, which lays out pretty clearly what's going on. Got it? Then let's get into the story. Evergrace is told from the view of two people, Charlene and Darius. They are both like siblings to each other, although they are not related by blood. Darius is a so-called crest bearer, which means he has a strange symbol with unknown powers on his body. In his case, the back of his hand. The crest is seen as a bad omen by most people, and crest bearers are often shunned, so he keeps it a secret from anyone but Charlene, the person he trusts the most. One day, their home gets attacked by a group of assassins from an enemy village. Charlene shields her brother from the attack, dying in the process. Except she doesn't actually die. She gets isekai'd into the lost empire of Rubain, a place that once prospered due to the scientific research of its court magician, Morpheus, who, in his desire to unlock the mysteries of the crest, created the Palmyra armaments. But one day, without warning, the empire vanished into thin air. In its place sprouted a forest of Bilyana trees, strange plants who are somehow linked to the crest, and whose seedless fruit are the source of Palmyra power. In Rubain, Charlene wakes up in the home of a woman named Sienna, who found her unconscious body outside. They both get harassed by Morpheus, who is like the funniest character in the game, by the way. I love his bug-eyed face, and you can tell his voice actor is having a blast every time he's on screen.
This is cataclysmic indeed. There, it's done. I accept you. You're the real thing.
What are you babbling about? Show yourself, Morpheus!
He's accompanied by a weird one-winged angel child called Trandon. Sienna seems to know the two, and gets promptly kidnapped by Morpheus, not before identifying herself as a crest bearer. And so Charlene goes on a quest to save Sienna, figuring that she's probably the only one who can tell her how she got here, and what the hell's going on. Meanwhile, some years have passed, and Darius has become a capable swordsman. He's pursuing the people who killed Charlene into the forest, as some force transports him into Rubain as well. It's important to point out that time seems to flow differently in the Lost Empire. While years have passed in the outside world, Darius arrives just a short while after Charlene in Rubain, maybe a day apart at most. That's why Charlene comments on how much he's grown when they eventually meet. He used to be her younger brother, and now he's older than her. It's honestly pretty cute. In Rubain, Darius meets a bird-like creature called Chrysalis, who says that she was once human and got turned into this form by a demon. She implores Darius to kill the demon, and in the process find out what's going on in Rubain. Honestly, Darius' story feels a lot more fleshed out than Charlene's, and it helps that he gets a sidekick in the form of Chrysalis. The two have a fun dynamic, and this story arc is quite a bit more enjoyable as a result, at least in my opinion. Poor Charlene definitely got the short end of the stick by the writers, unfortunately. Over the course of the adventure, Darius and Charlene travel the Lost Empire of Rubain to uncover its secrets and find a way to get back to their own time. Through snippets of NPC dialogue and in-game documents, the player can try and piece together some of the background mysteries. Why did Rubain disappear? What is the significance of the crest, and how does it relate to the Bilyana trees? What in the flying fuck is up with Trandon? Especially compelling is the Mother of All Things, a great Bilyana tree whose mysterious powers and purpose are only hinted at in the game. This is kind of what makes Evergrace's story so compelling. Despite the bad voice acting making a lot of the cutscenes feel silly, there is an air of mystery and dread about everything. Honestly, in my opinion, Evergrace has the most intriguing setting and lore out of any FromSoft game I've played, with the possible exception of Elden Ring. And that's saying a lot. The story also gets pretty somber and emotional. It features one of FromSoft's most tragic characters, whose fate actually made me cry, which is not something most games from the studio accomplish. I would highly recommend to anyone to check out this game's story for themselves. Don't let the memeable cutscenes fool you. There is actually a lot going on here that's worth experiencing on your own.
Finally, we almost made it. This will be our hardest challenge yet.
Evergrace is a weird game. I hesitate to call it good. It's too uneven of an experience for that. but it is incredibly interesting and unique, and that is something I value much more in a game than some nebulous concept of quality. It's a game with many frustrating moments and questionable design decisions, but the core gameplay loop is genuinely compelling, and I had a great time just fighting enemies and saving up for new gear. Its story is buried under cryptic writing and questionable voice acting, but once the pieces fall together, it is absolutely the most interesting, emotionally affecting story I've experienced in a game by this company. Lastly, the dreamlike vibes of this game are just completely out of this world. The music, the visuals. There is no other game that feels the way that Evergrace feels. It is absolutely irreplaceable. Evergrace is exactly the kind of game that makes me love this hobby. Discovering something that may not be super polished, but is so utterly unique and strange and wonderful, and being able to share that experience with others makes me genuinely happy. Before I leave, I just want to add some things about the game that didn't really fit anywhere else in the script. Evergrace actually has an optional dungeon called the Shadow Tower. I wonder what that's in reference to. It's pretty well hidden. In order to get there, you need to find an enemy called a Palmyra bee. These bees only appear when you hit certain objects in the environment with your weapon. I never even encountered them on my first playthrough, and I probably wouldn't have found them at all without the help of the wiki. If you kill a Palmyra bee, which is easier said than done because they're really fucking fast and will knock you on the ground, they have a chance of dropping an item called a Dark Guide Post. This item can either be sold for a lot of money, or used to access the Shadow Tower at any save point. Now, I haven't actually finished this dungeon, because it's honestly pretty annoying, but I'll leave that as a challenge for you all. I hear you even get the Moonlight Greatsword at the end as a reward. Evergrace also has a sequel, or rather a prequel, called Evergrace 2 in Japan, and Forever Kingdom in the West. It looks really interesting, and who knows, maybe I'll check it out someday. Thank you all very much for sticking around to the end of this video. It was my most ambitious video yet, and it would mean a lot to me if you could leave a like, a comment, and share it around. Share it with your family, share it with your friends. Hell, share it with your enemies, I don't care. Just share it, because the YouTube algorithm probably won't. My name is Dizzy, and I will be seeing you all next time. Bye bye. Thanks for watching.